Hello, everyone. I am looking through the pack for the Danish Nationals, which is available on the Danish Bolt Action Facebook group. It's under files, and you can find it there. It's the preliminary pack. So the main pack, or the final pack, will be out as soon as we have drawn the 5 missions that we're going to play at the Danish Nationals. This is the mission pack with all the missions that we could possibly play. I've been looking through it, and this video today will be a video about the first of the scenarios, No Man's Land. It's pretty much the scenario from the rulebook, although there are some for some of these scenarios, there are some minor details that you might want to check out when reading up and preparing for the Danish Nationals. But most people should be fairly familiar with most of the scenarios in this book. No Man's Land is the kill point scenario from the rulebook. You score 1 victory point per enemy dice lost during the game. So, and you need 2 more victory points than the enemy to score a win. Otherwise, it's a draw. There's a 12-inch deployment zone on each side of the table, and you deploy using the dice in bag method. So there's the first, for me, when I play this scenario, that's the first place where I start thinking tactically. Of course, I choose the side of the table that I think favors me the most. But from there on, once you have the dice in bag, it's a question, right, of skewing the dice, of waiting as long as possible before you deploy your stuff. Because if you can get the enemy to deploy their stuff first, you have the advantage of being able to counter-deploy. If he's placing his anti-tank gun there, looking that way, right, you're over there. So for me at least, I always do the things that doesn't really matter first. So if I have troops in a transport, they go down first on a dice, if I get one of my dice, right? If I have a lieutenant that I'm not going to use for much, I'm going to run him up behind some line of sight, blocking cover, and just stick him there. I'm going to waste dice for as long as possible until I see the opponent start moving troops in and setting them up in his deployment zone. So that's the first advice I can give. You can use outflank, and you can use reserves, and you can use forward deployment. Outflank, I'm not always a big fan of. It can be very hit and miss, right? But you can see outflanks that really mess up an opponent's plan. But there is a danger here, because if your outflankers don't come in, if you don't make the rolls in the time limit, and the game ends and your outflankers is outside, they count as dead. So you might actually lose the game on not getting your outflankers or reserves in. But I would recommend, for this scenario, to use reserves, especially because in this scenario there are preparatory bombardment. So units that are small teams, single models, and vehicles, I would suggest that you look at maybe having them in reserve or outflank, simply because if the preliminary bombardment comes down, they are more likely to die. If it's a large unit of infantry, they're pretty unlikely to suffer any harm. You can lose 1 model and get a few pins, whatever. But if it's like a one-man unit, if it's a lieutenant, or if it's a small team, losing 1 model can be catastrophic. And if it's a vehicle, that vehicle gets hit on the top, and it has a pen value, so the vehicle can die. And if you have troops in it, and the vehicle dies, they get hit as well. So it's a huge risk, especially putting transports into the table when there's a preliminary bombardment. Think about using reserves. Also remember that if you have forward deployers, they are outside your deployment zone, most often, if you deploy them. in forward deployment, right? After you've set up all your troops using the Dyson bag, you roll off for forward deployers, and you can set the first forward deployer if you win that roll off. You're putting them in your half of the table, but outside your deployment zone most often. And I would recommend you do that, because if you put them in your deployment zone, they get hit by the preliminary bombardment, but outside it, you don't. So that's a really good way of securing some of your troops. Put them outside your deployment zone. Doesn't have to be long, just 1 inch or whatever. That's enough. Also, you have 24-inch visibility for the first turn, which means that you cannot not actually see things that are in the enemy's... Lights just went out. I'm just going to wait for the lights to come on again. Just a sec. Very unprofessional. You cannot actually see anything that's in the enemy's deployment zone for the first turn. It often doesn't matter, because most often people will spend the first turn just rallying everything because everything is pinned out. But it might matter, because if you have forward deployers, then they are in danger because they're inside the 24-inch range of visibility for the first turn. So think about that for a minute. The tactic that I most often employ when I play No Man's Land is I try to kill something easy. A lieutenant, a forward deployer, a sniper, whatever, if I can get to it. I shoot it, kill it, and if I get ahead by 2 points, I retreat, because I am winning. And if I retreat down into safety of cover, hard cover, line of sight blocking, and congest my army into one piece where I can sort of defend everything. Everything has like multiple units that can sort of... Then he has to attack a fortress that I'm making because he's behind 2-0. So he has to come at me. And I find that most often when people attack in bold action, many attacks are not coordinated enough. They will make mistakes. They will come at you one at a time, and you'll be able to cut them down, and you'll be able to win that trade-off. Because if you're just trading 1-to-1, from there on, you're still winning. But most often you'll trade better than 1-to-1, because the enemy will try to push at you. And you can push him into more and more desperate measures. He will be more and more desperate to gain dice from you. So you can actually play defensively from there on in and win the game. So, tactics and things to think about in No Man's Land. See you next time. Cheers.